Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Roy Mill, who is CEO and co-founder of Joshu. Roy, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Good. I'm just doing that awful thing that I've done. I've started the podcast very confidently, said Joshu, and then didn't double check with you. That's how you pronounce it. So have I started right? We're in the.
I think so. That's how we pronounce it. Yes.
That's a good place to start. Well, before we dive in, Roy, it'd be really great if you could introduce yourself and obviously the Joshu business and what it is that you guys do.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Roy Mill. I'm co-founder and CEO here at Joshu. Joshu is a platform for insurance product development and distribution. I'm sure we'll go deeper into that in detail, but at a high level, we're helping insurance product owners build and deploy new insurance products for digital distribution. That's in a very short elevator pitch, length.
Yeah. But I think those are always the best ones. I've always had a bit of a thing that if it takes too long to explain, it's either not shape. It's not got product market fit because it needs to roll off the tongue, right? It needs to just go bam, and you need to understand it. We've had a few pitches for work that we've had to sort of go. Well, we're a bit early, and you go, yeah, you're definitely early because I don't understand. Not saying that I understand everything, but I always think the simpler the better. That's always the way. So. I've got to start with your background, Roy, because I think it's a really interesting one, particularly in the context of, I think, talking about flexibility of skill sets to move between industries. I think, because as someone that works in the talent side of the equation, I'm always interested in that because I think insurance and now insurtech has sometimes been reluctant to pull people in, but obviously your background isn't linear into the insurance industry. And then, of course, you've been working at one of the most preeminent insurtechs globally. So that's really interesting. So my understanding is you used to work at Ancestry, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Yeah, and then into AppBay. And so talk to me about that. So you come from the product side of the house. Is that the kind of predominant part of your experience?
I do. I mean, it's even. I'm kind of, sometimes I describe myself as a migrant, both geographically and professionally. Mm-hmm. I'm from Israel originally. I moved in 2008 to the Bay Area for school. I was supposed to be an economist. I am trained as an economist, and I was supposed to become a professor of economics, and kind of found myself, for personal and other reasons, found myself going out of academia and looking for other roles, and found a job with Ancestry. This is where I kind of honed in some of my more technical and analytical skills and kind of added a lot of user experience and product design parts to my skill set. I was there for about 4 years on the family history side and the DNA data side. And then some friends from Israel called and said, hey, we have a new startup. We are looking for someone to lead the product management side. And would you be interested? And I wasn't planning on going into insurance. I thought insurance was boring, but I knew them. Said, let's talk, and found a great group of people and an actually really interesting problem to take on. So I got very excited and joined quite early. My co-founder in Joshu, Shimi, was kind of one of the first employees, not the first employees there. I joined about a year after the company started, but before we got the reinsurance capacity, all that good stuff. So AppBay is where we, both of us, learn about insurance and kind of tackle the basic problem that Joshu is tackling today. We learn how complex and slow it is to take a product to market, an insurance product. One thing I learned is that product management for an insurtech that sells insurance, there are two types of, there's the insurance product and there's the tech product, kind of building the tech stack for the full stack kind of MGA that sells insurance. And there's a lot of back and forth. We're actually selling the insurance product, but without the tech folks, without the IT, there's a lot of times the title that we were given, it's very hard to operationalize your ambitions, your dreams, your vision. You have to build a tech stack to get that. And we learned firsthand how complex it could be. And so we saw a bigger opportunity than just building the tech stack for one insurance insurer, and saying, hey, this is probably a wider problem than just ad bay, and probably even harder in larger organizations with with more traditional kind of ways of doing things. And we said, hey, let's try to productize what we did, and let's try to build a platform that will allow anyone who's an insurance professional, understands distribution and risk and coverage and all that good stuff, but doesn't have the UX and web application development chops to take it to the digital world and get that for them out of the box. That's kind of a kind of long-winded story and a long-winded career so far to get to where I am and where we are.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things I want to unpack there. So just, let's get a bit deeper into this, because what I was fascinated by and I thought was quite excited about, because one of your colleagues was very kind actually to run me through the sort of pitch deck, and we don't really see that as in, and to potential customers. And sometimes we have technology but focused businesses on, and we don't run through that, and my imagination is filling in the gaps, but because I don't have a tech background, I sometimes wonder how far my imagination is from the realization. But what really kind of got me excited was the distillation, and I know this is on the website, that essentially if I can build you a rating engine in an Excel spreadsheet, you can provide me a tech stack to kind of roll out a product. Is that oversimplifying it, or is that?
No, this is great. This is a lot of the traditional way of doing this, building an insurance product for digital distribution, or the way most folks are doing it, before Joshu, is it's kind of a 3-floor building that you build. The first floor is the insurance product. You go and, you design what information you want to get, and then you design the rules, usually in Excel, unless it's an ISO product and, all the rating bureaus and the standardized. But especially in specialty, and a lot of times even in standard products, there's proprietary rating that the actuaries are giving you, and you have an Excel that manifests all these rules, and then a bunch of documents to generate for the policy, the endorsements, and all that. And so once you have that first floor, the second floor is usually, let's get a policy admin system, let's build it, a data model, and let's build kind of the underwriter tools to go and underwrite. And then only in the third floor is, okay, let's build a portal that connects to this policy admin system. And this process is really long, and not just long, but it also breaks kind of the ownership of the insurance product manager. Before, when everything was manual and PDF or fax machine, or I'm not sure what used to be back in the day, the underwriters used to do the whole thing, decided the rules and go ahead and underwrite. When people started building automatically underwriting machines, you had to get in an engineer to build it for you. And then any change you wanted to make, just to build it, you have to kind of always relay that information to someone else. And that takes a long time, and the back and forth is just sometimes quite frustrating. So the whole vision for us was, let's give the insurance professional, that product owner, head of product X for a carrier, or the chief underwriting officer for a new MGA, give them this tool that, with a very moderate learning curve, from the convenience of their laptops, they'll be able to get a full end-to-end portal, or quote and buy an API. They don't need to worry about building this. You see this also, the thing is, at Bay, some of what we built there in the tech stack was related to rethinking underwriting and using some of the cyber tools, but maybe 80 or 90% of what we built ended up being distribution technology. So the portal, white label portal, or an API, and a system for the underwriters. And when you think about it, a lot of the competitors and other insurtechs, they're building a very similar apply, quote, bind flow. What changes is, what questions are you asking? What's your model? What paper are you writing on? And these are the things that became a configuration on our platform. You can just set it like a settings in our builder, and then the portal and everything else is taken care for you. Take care of for you. Sorry, it's still early in the morning.
Are you specifically targeting sort of people that are rolling out digital MGAs, or are you targeting like carriers and sort of allowing them to digitize their products, or is it everything in between?
It's both, and I think there's the way we see the different prospects are kind of two main segments. There are new players versus established players. That's the main differentiation, because new players come with, clean slate, green field, and they need a system to take their idea and make it into a reality. That's one type. Usually they're MGAs, because it's very hard to start as a new carrier, and kind of much faster to start as an MGA. And by the way, these can be tech native, venture backed types of insurtechs, but also a lot of brokers or underwriters who specialize in a field and decide, hey, we have a new take on this, or we have a nice distribution channel. Let's try to build an MGA out of. And then the second end of this is like carriers who already have, or established players, and these can be carriers or MGAs. They already have a tech stack. They already are selling. And for them, the way we position Joshu is a place for experimentation, at least to start with, because it's so easy and for insurance professionals to be independent. IT departments are very busy with maintaining the systems, making sure they're integrated. A lot of carriers are in the midst of a very long digital transformation process, and it leaves very little room for insurance product innovation, right? I want to get that, management liability product. I want to get that any type of product that you want that's outside of the quickly commoditized standard products. It's very hard to get the resources from the IT department to get, not even build it completely. It would be nice to get some feedback from the market and people to tell you, hey, if I had something like this, yes, I would definitely send my business to you. How fast can you get it? So we're seeing both new players, we're seeing both, and the more established players. Obviously, with the new players, there's a sense of urgency and a shorter sales cycle, because they need something very quickly to get off the ground.
It's really interesting, because we're a search firm that specializes in insurtech recruitment, but for a large part of my career, I was doing very traditional underwriting or broking talent, and a lot of the work we did was people would come to us and say, we want to put together an MGA. We try and help them find capacity, or we try and help them find an investor. And one of the massive stumbling blocks was, we've got this idea, but there was just a huge, like, they knew everything about insurance, they knew everything about their kind of line of business, but where there was a huge gap was that, where's the right tech stack? How do we digitize this? How do we basically make our vision come true? And I think that for me that was the obvious win. And that's notwithstanding, obviously, talking about carriers that are trying to kind of compete, and almost like the fact that you're outside of their internal stack. We've talked about this on this podcast several times, in that the talent within insurance businesses, and this is a lazy, very generic thing I'm about to say, but it's generally about keeping the current infrastructure active and working. So to kind of operate with new digital, API ready products is quite a challenge, because essentially you've got two different sets of skill sets. So do you need, notwithstanding building an internal team which has a different kind of talent profile, different skills, it's so much better to kind of go, okay, we're going to test these new products out. If we've hired a new team to do it, then that's a huge cost, and they might have to go if the product doesn't work. But the opportunity to kind of get a Joshu and go, right, let's spin up a new product quickly, effectively, is hugely advantageous. So yeah, it's a really exciting thing for me. But I've got to ask you, the one thing that I wanted to ask you, AtBay is famously a very successful insurtech. It's been on an absolute huge burn. We've had them on the podcast. We had a lovely conversation. Why that seems like the crazy time to leave, because one imagines, you'd have had good options. You both had senior roles. I think you were VP of products and your colleague was CTO or VP of technology. Why was now the time? Was it too good an opportunity to ignore? Did you? Are we going to uncover some scandal?
Of course, on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No scandals. No. And in hindsight, it was terrible timing, right? Because 2 months, we left in January of 2020, not knowing that the world is going to go upside down 2 months since, right after that. And to us, it was kind of, AdBay was in this inflection point. We were there since very early on, and people now they see a very successful business, and it is, but it took time to get there. And we actually had to launch the product twice, and kind of shift strategies until you find that product market fit. And to me and to Shimi, my co-founder, both of us, the exciting part is the 0 to 1. Let's build something out of nothing. And Joshu is also kind of a tribute to that for insurance people. If you have a dream and it's 0 right now, you can get to 1. Let's get to 1 right much faster than we did before. And AdBay was going into this as it was, found traction, or kind of 2 ways. One is going deeper on the insurance, become an insurance company. They are an insurance company, but kind of there's always this, with insurtechs, are we a tech company or are we an insurance company? Well, as you scale, you have to become more of the insurance company. There was also another aspect of cyber, maybe going deeper into cyber, but the tech and the product that we were building, that felt like we were getting into we've solved the basic problems. Obviously, there are more stuff to do, and they have a great tech team, and kept working since then. But for us, we wanted to, again, saw this big opportunity beyond being an internal tech team for an insurance or insurer, and start a software selling business for the industry as a whole. And it's exciting, it's very, it's a roller coaster in a lot of senses, and I'm glad, definitely I was joking about, in hindsight, not being the greatest timing, but I'm really lucky, and kind of the ability to fundraise and to build this team around us is truly like an amazing experience. I'm still, it's a lot of hard moments as well, but in the in the sum of things, it's pretty amazing that we've come this way, and kind of also looking at what we can build with the business. Pretty excited for what's ahead.
Yeah, I love that part of the journey. I mean, we specifically focus on kind of seed to Series B, really. Like we like those earlier stage businesses for exactly that. The kind of we like helping people build the 0 to 1 part of it. And I wouldn't say we lose interest at the end, but it's just when the more established kind of, when you're rotating roles and you're filling a role where someone's left with the same, it's not as exciting as saying, we want to grow the team. What do we, who do we take in? How do we prioritize? Do we bulk up our product team, or do we bulk up our sort of sales team? And I think making those decisions is super interesting. You mentioned the COVID there and the timing of the kind of launch. How did that change anything for you? Did it cause you? Was there any pivoting? Was there any kind of changing of strategy because of the timing of launching mid-pandemic or setting up mid-pandemic?
Yeah, I think there wasn't a pivot in the product. I think we did iterate a lot. I'm not sure if it's the pandemic or just a long search. I can blame, it's at least an excuse for why it took us so long. So I have that. I can blame the pandemic, not my fundraising skills. But sure. I think, the story you always iterate on. You understand it more as you go along. We kind of focused on fundraising, but also building a proof of concept and talking to more people in the industry. And that was really helpful. But no, there's not a pivot. It was just, I think it's in the end, sometimes I think the year later, it felt like it was much easier to get funding. I know that a lot of people, great people, did not get funding. It doesn't mean that, but still, I think it's good that it took us some while before we got to Bloomberg and before we found this, the investors we have today. It kind of helped us really distill what we're trying to do and the vision here. And, starting in 2021 as a funded company, still in the pandemic. Obviously, there's also the angle of remote working that is kind of, we have a branch in Tel Aviv under Shimi, and they have an office and everyone is kind of physically there. But here in the US, it was just mid-pandemic, and nobody, even if you were here in the Bay Area, we would have worked remotely. But then it also allowed us to cast a wider net in terms of talent and finding it. And for us, especially, as you mentioned, in the early stages, you're looking for people, kind of disciplines that will complement what you have. And the Bay Area has great technical talent, but limited insurance talent, and it was great to kind of find talent in other places.
But Bay Area has very expensive technical talent as well. That's one of the challenges.
Very expensive everything. Yes.
Yeah, quite. I'm interested to sort of going back to the, your experience. Obviously, at Bay was where you sort of really got under the skin of insurance, so obviously you learned that. But I'm wondering how, like, your experience at that point, and going back to Ancestry as well, as sort of informed your role as a founder. Like, what are those kind of key lessons, before you kind of found, because this is your first business that you've co-founded, is that correct?
Correct.
So what do you think are the sort of key things you've brought through those experiences working at those companies that you kind of really stick with today?
Yeah, again, I think this migrant feeling that you have, and both geographically and professionally, and migrant is kind of a bridge between two, where they came from and where they are going to, and gives them this, or another way, professionally also, you come from one discipline and you go into this new, I was an economist, right? An academic is something you go into a corporate that has, selling family history tools. What do you do there? You have to pick up some new things that you didn't know before, but you also can bring to the table something that the rest of the team does not have. With Ancestry, was a role in the storytelling, context, and narrative team. Basically take structured data and turn it into stories. And and as an economist, I was actually studying historical censuses and kind of knew the data pretty well to come up with, like, if it's statistical inferences or other ways to kind of bring that data and make it into a story. And that was, at some point my boss was like saying, it feels like you were born for this role, right? Because how else can you find someone who knows some data and some software development and some history? There's usually not a lot of people who span those things. And I ended up not being, there are more, I want to believe that the roles that I've done later, I have a good match with them, not, as good as the role at Ancestry, but I think you need to bring those skills from before, but also have the plasticity to kind of reshape them and reapply them in different ways, and not be super rigid about how you did things, and learn from what you do. And I think it's also important for us to hire people from those diverse backgrounds, because if we get the same people who got through the same journey, we're not really challenging ourselves, and we're not bringing new skill sets to the table. So, some examples, I guess, from as an economist, you learn it's kind of like a social mathematician. You're looking at a social problem, a very soft, kind of not very well-defined problem, and you try to simplify it, and you try to generalize and distill this one core insight about it. You're not going to explain everything, but it's one core insight. And in product management and in business, it served me really well to kind of try to apply the same kind of very basic skills, but completely differently applied. This is not writing a paper. This is not running a regression. It's a different way, but there's some very kind of, and it's a unique point of view because there's not a lot of other economists that become product managers. And from Ancestry, you might think there's just nothing between Ancestry and insurance, but family history and insurance, both of them have a lot of data that's structured and unstructured. And, both from a system perspective and a product design perspective, you're both at Ancestry and with Joshu, we're building a system that will be a power tool for the experts, but also simple enough for new entrants to come in and be able to do things without a lot of training. Our product team, not just myself, our head of design, head of product, both of them worked with me at Ancestry, and I brought them in, and they're bringing a lot of great kind of product design skills and experience from there. And at Bay, obviously, just the insurance and the early stage startup experience really helped kind of understand how I want to build the business, take on some of the good things, change some of the bad things, and kind of reinvent ourselves as Joshu.
I think that I love that phrase of essentially the immigrant mindset of kind of being, because I was just reflecting myself, because I've sort of made this story arc of my career of being sort of an insurance guy and then working insurance search for, a decade, and then falling into insurtech. And the what I love about insurtech for me is that I know enough about insurance so I can have the conversations, but it's, tech was very alien to me. So I could ask, if I'm being honest, I could ask the stupid question, and we know there's no such thing as a stupid question, but sometimes it's inherently obvious, and then what you find is that you ask what you think is the obvious question, and it's not an obvious question, but it's obvious to you because you're bringing a different mindset and a different background into the equation. And I love that with my team. I make a big thing of hiring people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and I love that sort of, you explain things. And if I get loads of recruitment professionals in a room and we start explaining, we'll all agree because that's the way things are done. And then you get someone from outside that environment and they ask a question, it always sits you back on your feet going, yeah, why do we do it that way? I don't know. Maybe there is a better way. And it's that sort of healthy level of questioning about the thing that you're doing that I think so important, because I think insurance, as I'd already mentioned, I think it's been quite bad historically at bringing new talent in, and a little bit of that is because, to reiterate your point, everyone goes, isn't that a bit boring? And it's only when you start to unpack it, you're like, if you like big problems that are global and are at scale and are pervasive in every part of life, insurance is a great problem to solve. But it's only when you get under the skin of it you really start to see that.
Totally.
I wanted,
sorry,
please. No, please.
I think we need to do a better job of attracting talent from outside the industry, and just and also within the industry. I think there's a lot of people find it hard to go from an established carrier to an early stage startup. I think it's better than before because they've seen some of the great success stories of companies founded in 2016, 2017. There's some interest in insurtech. And I think for us, it's a big challenge to attract from all these places, make sure that also, again, it's not just bringing that different point of view, but also being able to then create this environment where people are comfortable enough sharing these views and working with each other and challenging each other, but not too much to kind of break the cord, cut the cord, but enough for them to be really kind of mutually productive and kind of making each other better than just working in separation.
I think insurance is definitely the sort of evolution rather than revolution type environment, because there was a lot of kind of very bullish marketing that went on in the sort of early stage of insurtech about it being broken, and it was kind of always the wrong message in that it's a regulated industry, so you can't break it and rebuild it. That's the regulated environment doesn't allow for that, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a revolutionary goal. Like there can be a revolutionary target, but that just might have to be 5 years away, and you might have to evolve the way there via tech or kind of product distribution or whatever. But I think it's interesting for me now that most of the kind of really exciting insurtechs that I see coming through, whether that be SaaS or whether that be digital-led insurers, are much more collaborative with the current existing marketplace and with the incumbent insurers and brokers, and kind of less kind of combative. And I think that's, I don't know, have you observed that kind of shift? That's something that I've just kind of noticed over the period of time I've been working in insurtech.
For sure. Yeah, I think a lot of those, there's this myth or mythos, probably the right word to use that, about kind of disrupting, and it can be taken in various ways. And I think it's really important to disrupt under a certain constraints. That's the challenge here. So the regulatory environment you have those constraints and learn about them. I mean, one of the things you're not aware, you need this grain of ignorance to start a business in insurance, right? You don't want to know all the details because that will be just too scary.
Yeah.
You want to, it's like getting a travel book, and then in the beginning they have all the warnings about what not to do when you travel to a new place, and you're like, okay, you know what? I'll just go to a different destination. And it's the same thing with founding a business. And I spoke with other founders. You need to have that a little bit of ignorance into what you're going into, but then again, with bringing people from the industry and understanding more of, you see a lot of kind of, I think one of the challenges is it's hard to know if the way things are done is because there's some kind of regulatory reasons that nobody even remembers, or it's because that's how we've done this for ages now. And sometimes you take out this old gate that you see only to discover that 3 miles ahead there's a beast, and that's why they put the gate there, right? So
That's it.
that's one of the challenges.
I'm gonna borrow that analogy. It's a really good one. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of that. There's definitely a lot of kind of, you got to know enough to be dangerous, and if you can avoid the obvious pitfalls, then that's useful. But I think the ignorance of launching a business is
being ignorant before you make the decision. Once you make the decision, now work on learning everything, and there's no way back. So you just keep on fighting.
Yeah. Be ignorant enough to be brave, or stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to talk about funding. Obviously, you've been through the funding rounds. You were being slightly self-critical of yourself earlier for taking too long to do it, but I know what an arduous journey is it. But I was interested to know, you basically had a ringside seat for a kind of a venture-backed business in At Bay, and obviously went through several funding rounds, and now you've had to lead a business through that process. Was there anything that surprised you, now that you were kind of responsible and at the front of that you weren't aware of going in? Talking about that sort of ignorance versus kind of learning phase that you might have gone through there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it was not a ringside, but more of a in-ring part of the business itself. The ringside, I think, the part that I didn't have visibility into, obviously, as a non-founder, was the investor relations part of this, and how do you actually go and fundraise. I wasn't there when they had, and At Bay was, from the sideline, a benchmark for us when we went fundraising, and we thought, they had 4 co-founders there with. I don't think any of them had experience in insurance, and based on a slide deck they raised from a very leading fund in Tel Aviv, and we thought it's going to, for us, with 3 or 4 years in insurance, we're experts. We know everything there is to know about insurance. Now it's going to be even easier. So I flew to Tel Aviv in February of 2020, and we thought maybe I'm going to come back with a term sheet, and that was definitely not the case. So I think definitely surprised by how long it took us to fundraise. I was thinking it's going to be shorter. And I think also there's something about a founder, and when you're just 2 founders starting a company, you're doing everything. It's not just product management, it's product, but it's also sales. A lot of it. I even had, for a very short while, kind of contributed to some of the code base. But I think the engineers are now still cursing me for touching that. They need to clean it up. But I think, the sales, I did not perceive myself as a salesperson. And I think for other people who are thinking into going into, founding a business, first, think twice. But I think just you're constantly selling, and you start selling to investors and prospects and employees. I think the main thing that, employees and investors, I think I could do that, but the selling to prospects somehow felt like I become this, again, we were talking about insurance being perceived as boring, sales as being perceived as sleazy and genuine, and it just didn't fit my own perception of myself. So, I wouldn't say that I'm the best salesperson. There are definitely parts where I'm being too genuine when I talk to prospects about what features we have and what features we don't have. But I think in the long run, I think it just, I'm bringing my kind of way of doing this. And as we scale, we bring in more people to the sales team, and, improving that. But yeah, as a founder, I think that's one of the time it took. There's also this, I think I change my perception of what am I trying to do here in fundraising. When people start fundraising, they think you have to, if an investor hears your story and is not convinced, you have to convince them. And at some point I shifted and said, no, it's not about convincing. You don't need to convince everyone. You actually, Peter Thiel has this book, 0 to 1. I highly recommend reading. Skip the first chapter about monopolies being good for society. But if monopolies are great for the monopolists, and then go into the rest of it, which says you have to have a contrarian view on the world, and that contrarian view will make you, if you turn out to be correct and the others turn out to be incorrect, gives you a great advantage. And this early stage fundraising is not about convincing everyone that yes, you have a great business. It's about pulling those balls out of the urn. Remember from statistics class, you're just randomly selecting folks, and then get to the point where you talk to an investor who listens to your pitch and says, you know what, yes, I get it. I'm with you on the same page. That's the process of fundraising. It's not about convincing everyone. You hear a lot of no's. Even some of the, I was talking to some of the other insurtech founders, very successful ones, who said you have to talk to 100 or more investors until you hear your first yes. Which, there's this quote that is misattributed, I think, to Einstein about the definition of insanity. You do the same thing again and again and expect different results, but there's a little bit of that in fundraising. You're expected to talk to so many investors, and then yes, at some point you'll find the one who shares your belief in view of the world.
I think that journey in fundraising is so similar to sales. I mean, because I think about what was a couple of things. I remember having a conversation with my uncle when I said I was going to set up on my own, and my uncle's a successful businessman, and he said, Alex, as soon as you start a business, you're a salesman, whether you like it or not, because you're always having to sell. And I think that's such a good such a good truism. And then the second thing about sales is that, one, it's weird that actually there's two things. One, it's really strange that sales has this kind of like sleazy image, and you're like, if no one sold anything, like none of us would be here, But that's always been my perception of sales. Once I got my head around it, was like, it's not about changing your pitch or trying to convince people that are not convinced. It's just about finding the people that want to buy. That there are unfortunately several people that do exactly what I do, and really it's about do people want to work with me from a recruitment perspective or one of my competitors? And there's not a lot I can do about that. We're generally speaking offering a fairly homogenous product. It's just who's going to kind of gel with me better than someone else. And so it's not about trying to convince these people. It's about finding the people that are already kind of in the right space. So, and it sounds like fundraising is an echo of that. It's just finding the right investor for you. Obviously shaping things where relevant. But I remember that I can't remember who it was, but someone said you need to learn enough from each pitch, but not kind of know what your non-negotiables are. If you changed it for every investor, then you'd end up with something that doesn't even look like your original idea. So it's a really interesting problem. I'm really conscious of time, so I wanted to ask you a question about innovation. You're offering carriers and MGAs like this full suite of digital tools needing to kind of bring their commercial insurance businesses online or create new products live. So innovation is like the core of what you do. I was wondering how you've gone about building your team and like an innovative culture at Joshu. Like, how do you kind of keep that culture of innovation alive?
Awesome question. We want to keep innovation, help innovation for our clients, but also be innovative internally. And I think there's kind of two parts of it. One is the selection part, or who's in the team and who's not in the team. So attracting talent, it's really, especially in the age of quiet quitting and the great resignation, is like, how do we get people who are committed? How do we get people who can challenge, again, as I said, can bring in expertise, but also not the same expertise, but challenge us and kind of move us to think about things in a different light, so that we pick the best way forward. And that has been a challenge, especially in 2021. Again, fundraising in insurtech in Tel Aviv, but globally, has been amazing. And that kind of the labor market for employers was really hard to find good talent, because people found, especially for early stage and round sizes of late 2020 weren't that great. And today it's it's somewhat easier to find, but I think still it's just really hard to find and to know and to screen for the things that you're looking for. But it's really important that the composition of the team will be a cohesive, committed group of people whose also talented. I mean, there's people have different levels of skills, and kind of you can think about the bell curve and kind of the distribution. All the startups, all the companies want to get the top, 5% or more. It's really hard to find those people. It's really hard to compete for them and to give them, why should they work for us and not for someone else? They're thinking about, how do I write the next chapter in my career book, and why is Joshu the right place to be at? And we, it's on us to make sure that we bring the best people. And once they're in, I think the second part is how to create a culture that, fosters this collaboration and innovation, as you mentioned. And for us, there were a few, and you need to also not do very long culture sessions, and it needs to be a very short message that you can repeat, that says, what do we foster? Not just the message, but also our behavior has to match it. We can't say, hey, we like transparency and then hide everything from everyone. So for us, the three things that I kept saying, and Jimmy and I were thinking about as we were starting Joshu, is transparency, empowerment, and empathy. And we added commitment since then. Again, I think it's really important for us to get people who are committed to building something new. But I think transparency is really important for us, because that fosters, and we're trying, and from what we understand, the employees are really happy with the level of transparency that they see from us. And it's something, it's not just transparency as not hiding stuff. You need to actively communicate what you're doing, especially in a remote team. It's not just sit in your own kind of computer and nobody, I won't hide anything, but it's really important. We, write a few lines every week on what you're working on today, and everyone shares that channel and everyone sees what's going on in other parts of the company. Empowerment, really important for us, that people, we set them up for success and allow them to voice what can they see, can we do different, and listen to them. I think it's having that humility. We're the founders and we're management and things like that, but we don't know everything, and hiring people who will complement our skills, but also then listen to them. It's easy to bring in someone from the industry and then decide, no, we're still going to disrupt everything and we're going to go our ways. I think these are some of the things. It's kind of also something that's hard to measure, to know, are we fostering an innovative environment, or are we going stale on how we built the organization and how we build the culture.
I mean, I would be biased and say this, but I do think it's 90% of it's hiring the right people in the first place. And
for sure, it's harder to change people once they're in. So attracting the right talent is important. Attracting, and then if something doesn't work, it's we have to say goodbye to some employees if things don't work as we expected, because it's always a noisy process, and you sometimes realize that's not a good match.
And then the other bit as well is knowing what you're getting. The amount of times this happens less in sort of startup businesses, but certainly one of the challenges that I've had in the past is working with like incumbent carriers is that we want someone really different, we want someone really innovative, we want someone who's going to be a change agent, and then you bring them that person and there's such a clash because that person has to be really constrained and there's not transparency and honesty, and so it's you have to, and that's why I thought your comment was brilliant about keeping it very simple. If you're going to have a tagline of culture, or if you're going to have sort of build things in about culture, it has to be simple. It has to be really distilled down, because anything over complex, it just becomes words on a wall. It becomes these slogans you put on every meeting room, and it becomes meaningless. So it's hard to live those things. I'm really sort of conscious of time, but I did want to ask you this, because I think you've got a really sort of innovative view on the insurance market, because of your journey to date, and because of the outside mindset. I think that's particularly interesting. We talk about waves of insurtech, and we've seen the kind of the 2016s and some of the rise and fall of some of those. Is there an area of insurtech that you, outside of your own business, that you think's interesting? Is there kind of a wave coming, or maybe even a place that you've spotted you think's a bit underinvested in the space, that you think we're going to see a lot of kind of growth in that next wave of insurtech?
Yeah, great question. Ask an economist to predict the future. But I'm not sure about the future, but trends that I do see now forming, and you can there's the insurtech has two flavors. One is, the full stack. We're selling insurance and we have technology, the lemonades and hippos and AdBays coalitions. And there's the other side of tech for insurance companies. And I think the full stack folks, I think I see a kind of blurring of the line between are you an insurtech or insurance company? Are you kind of a tech based, or especially with tools like Joshu, a nice plugin. Even, if you're an insurer that's, you don't bring all that tech workforce, you can still be and look as techy as any kind of venture backed insurtech. But I think, there are other tools, and there's just, I think more people, it used to be the case that people from tech did not know anything about insurance and people from insurance did not know anything about tech. And I think there's been enough cross-pollination that you have a lot of folks that are, ex-coalition, ex-AdBay teams who built new startups, and kind of there's more people who come from both sides or have enough experience there. I think for the other side of the house, for the tech for insurers, I realize, and a lot of vendors, I think it's going to be more of kind of a connected future where you realize you're not building your own system in kind of isolation of what else is going on with open APIs and everything. There's a lot of startups who focus on maybe a narrow problem, but it's still, because insurance is so huge, even if it's a narrow problem, it's a big need, and you can build a great startup around it. And you have to kind of collect those integrations with all these tools in order to solve the problem. It's really hard for one startup to do the whole thing. So I think we'll see a lot of kind of combinations, overlap between and integrations between some of these tools. So really excited to see who's going to win the race, or what types of combinations insurers will make between all those startups in how they kind of piece together those pieces of the puzzle, their tech puzzle.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the sort of collaborative environment of the tech space in insurance is really interesting. And and on that note, I think we'll probably see everyone at ITC. Are you going to be you are at ITC, aren't you? I think
Yes,
we've discussed this with the
Kiosk
team.
91.
Yeah,
Please
we will swing by, definitely. So look, Roy, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's really kind of you to spend some time with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.